Welcome back to the Rhetorical Modes series at Stanley Community College. Now that you have a firm grasp of each of the modes, it's time to blend them together.
Will it blend? That is the question.
To do this, we decided that the best way to illustrate your goal is to blend ourselves in this video.
Many students are confused by how to properly blend modes to achieve a purpose. They understand how to narrate or describe or classify, but when asked to put them together, they draw a blank. They wonder, what does this even mean?
It's simpler than it may initially sound. For instance, we're presenting a conversation to you right now that you can easily seamlessly follow. But it's being presented by a whole range of people. There are 4 of us in total.
Let our powers combine.
But when a new person comes on screen and picks up the thread of the discussion, you don't have any trouble following along.
You can follow along because you intuitively understand how our 4 dialogues bleed into one. We all 4 have the same goal, but to create this video we each had to show up at different times and do our part. Likewise, the rhetorical modes have to each do their part together. As you write, if you concentrate on the individual pieces of each mode, the total comes together for your reader in much the same way that this video does.
By now, it should be evident that this is a matter of concentrating on the details of your writing in order to achieve the overall purpose. Trust us, you do this all the time. In some ways, we're teaching you what you already know. You do already know how to narrate, classify, and all of the other modes. So don't concentrate on that part. Instead, concentrate on what we want you to see. How to harness what you already know to better achieve your purpose.
Let's consider an example. Suppose someone wishes to argue with a man who is convinced that women are inferior. The person wants to convince him otherwise. How can this be accomplished?
Before taking English 111, someone arguing against this man might resort to some of the easiest forms of discourse that we all frequently see used. These include screaming, name-calling, or repeating the same kinds of examples.
However, with the rhetorical modes in mind, this person could easily think of new examples. If we wish to argue the case, we would want to compare and contrast men and women. This lets us know that we need to maintain an AB-AB structure consistently throughout our response. In addition, all of the advice from the compare and contrast section now shapes our argument.
After this, we might use narration to tell the story of a man in charge, like Genghis Khan, versus a woman in charge, like Queen Elizabeth I. We also might spend a bit of time describing both of them so that we can remind our readers of who they are.
We might then define violent behavior by giving examples such as Genghis Khan's handling of prisoners or Queen Elizabeth I's reluctance to put her half-sister to death.
Thereafter, we could classify the actions of these 2 world leaders into that definition. The result is that Genghis Khan would clearly be an example of how men in charge can be violent, whereas women in charge can create a golden age.
We can also think of the effect of having only men on the planet. The human race would go extinct after only 1 generation. This is in contrast to having only women on the planet. The human race would survive because women have the biological equipment to produce new humans, and we have artificial insemination. If you rewind, you'll notice that we use compare and contrast patterns consistently with the other modes to achieve our goal. Men were always presented first, because we're arguing against them, while women drove home our point.
As you can see from this example, blending together rhetorical modes does 2 main things for you. First, it helps you to organize your thoughts. Because you know how to study these modes, you know how best to organize the compare and contrast essay. You also know how best to narrate or to classify or to do any of the others that we discussed. With these in hand, you can approach any prompt with some organizational strategies in mind.
Second, and as the example shows, you can use these modes to help you think about what you already know. Again, you could traditionally work through the examples we just mentioned, perhaps by shouting or just stumbling on the ideas. But by thinking in terms of the modes, you're better able to flesh out your ideas and your argument in a meaningful way. Blending modes is about thinking on your topic in specific ways.
As a piece of advice with your blending rhetorical modes paper, don't think of this the big picture. Think rather of the individual pieces and how you're going to put those together. If you're comparing and contrasting TV shows, for example, you might at minimum narrate, because you have to summarize the plot, and describe to depict each one of the characters.
You might then use any of the other modes. If you are talking about a reality TV show, you'll use a process narrative. How did they bake a cake on Hell's Kitchen?
It's raw, Melissa.
Yes, chef.
It's raw. Come on.
If you're describing comedies, you might classify them and discuss how they differ and how they're similar. Definition could be used with a range of things, from defining the goofy everyman from the show to being used in a combination with classification to discuss genre. Taken in small bits like this, it isn't so difficult as it initially seems.
Let your instructor know if you have any questions as you work through the content. We're all here to help you.
That's it.
Perfect.